weather outside and you are on time, and the event is also quite going to be very, very interesting. We had some outstanding speakers, international speakers who are so experienced in the subject. Before I call upon the speakers, let me briefly tell you what's happening in MMA next few days so that you don't miss them and you make it a point. Tomorrow, 9th of May, this is happening on Saturday, not tomorrow, 9th of May, Find Your True North. So we do that outreach program. This is happening at Ananagar. Then on Monday, we have an online quiz on the National Technology Day. Every month we pick up National Science Day, National Legal, every time, every month, 2 events. So in addition to weekly quiz, we do the special quiz so that you get to know something what's happening and why the country celebrates National Technology Day. So we have some outstanding quiz. So please do log in on 11th May. This quiz is open from morning 9 to night 9 o'clock. Then 14th of May, again, we have Read and Grow. You all know Read and Grow. We do that exclusively for the management students. We strongly believe that to be a great leader, you have to be a great reader. But I've seen many of the outstanding leaders, they are voracious readers. And we want to build that habit of reading, and we do pick up some outstanding books for you to come and listen from the speakers who are chosen very, very carefully, beautifully curated program. And I wish all of you, especially students who are watching the program, must attend this. Next one, what we are going to do is the hard thing about hard thing, building a business when there are no easy answers. So it's a lovely book, and we got C.S. Sangeeta, Sumesh, Shankaran, and Srinivas, and Nitin, and we have 3 outstanding panel which will be discussing on this book. Then on 25th of May, we have another endowment lecture. We are in the process of finalizing it with the CPCL because we want to collaborate quite a lot with public sector undertaking. We know the public sector undertaking of India are doing some phenomenal work. Navaratna, Magaratna, I think unless you listen to them and what they do, it will be a great learning for us. We have public sector leadership in nation building from legacy to the future readiness. This is the team where we have some, again, an outstanding speaker going to be coming. This is on 25th of May. On 29th of May, again, we have a full day paid conclave. We are doing it jointly with the Institute of Internal Auditors, leading with trust, financial leadership, governance and strategy in disruptive world. So we have again some lovely sessions, including branding for financial guys. So you are interested, it's almost, we already have over 200 nominations filled up for this event, and I suggest you come. Again, on the last event for what I'm going to tell you is the 1st of June. We have again building high performance teams, lessons from military leadership in large-scale operations. We are getting General Batmanaban, who is General Ananta Narayanan, who is a highly decorated officer from Army in the General. He is going to be there. Raju, our past president, will be chairing the session. So he is part of a China operations. He was there, Dalwan. You want to tell us what is going to happen? Listening to today's China, when you listen to him, it will be totally different ballgame. But it doesn't matter, but it's really worth listening to the people. Coming to today's subject, India in the China, navigating global supply chain amid shifting geopolitics. And we are indeed privileged, honored and blessed to have 2 outstanding people who know this subject so well, and they are going to articulate some of the research work, what they have done, because many of us are not aware of China. The only thing we know about China is what you all read in newspapers. You are going to know something more than what is there in the public domain. We are lucky to have with us 2 outstanding speakers. One is Dr. Frank, other one is Dr. Srinivas. They are going to be talking to us on this important subject. We also have with us Manoj Joseph, who will be a member of the Managing Committee, MD of THEJO, will be delivering the very introduction, and Josh. Josh, what to say about me? Josh is one of the well-wishers of MMA, great leader, and he's done so much of, some of the finest, biggest, huge organizations he handled. He's going to be telling us what exactly it means and what thing. Ladies and gentlemen, put your hand together to welcome the outstanding panel for this evening, Dr. Srinivas, Frank, Josh, and Manoj. May I request the dignity to please take your place on the dais, sir. Come. Yeah, I got it. Yeah, the format of the program for this evening, you all know we have Mr. Manoj will be delivering the formal welcome and introduction. Thereafter, the speakers will share their perspective. Then Josh will share his. Then there will be a free-flowing conversation, and thereafter we have a Q&A. The Q&A is we have a Mentimeter. So you have any questions from you, please scan the QR code and send your questions. All the viewers watching this program live, please share your questions. There's already a QR code and also the thing. And the speakers will respond to all your questions actually. So you can send them. But don't ask your question when is the swearing in ceremony is going to happen. I think we have no answer. So today your answer has to be to the subject what you are going to be discussing today. Now it's my privilege to welcome and request Mr. Manoj Joseph to deliver the formal welcome introductory remarks. Can I have Mr. Manoj AV please?
Mr. Manoj Joseph is the Managing Director of THEJO Engineering Ltd and a member of the MMA Managing Committee with over 30 years of experience in the mechanical and industrial engineering sector. Mr. Manoj leads a team of 800 professionals, driving global expansion and delivering innovative solutions across mining, power, cement, and steel industries. With strengths in marketing, operations, and design thinking, Mr. Manoj focuses on innovation, value creation, and organizational excellence.
I now request Manoj to please deliver the formal welcome and introduction. Over to you, Mr. Manoj.
Good evening. It is indeed my privilege to deliver the welcome address at this very special event on the theme India in the China+1 era, navigating global supply chains amid shifting geopolitics, organized with the support of KS. It is my pleasure to welcome this evening Dr. Srinivas, Visiting Research Professor, East Asian Institute, National University of Singapore. Dr. Frank N. Pieke, Dutch cultural anthropologist and expert on modern China, Visiting Research Professor, East Asian Institute, National University of Singapore. Mr. Josh Foulger, President, IT, Hardware and New Projects, Dixon Technologies India Limited. I also take this opportunity to welcome all the members of MMA, our guests from other organizations and all the participants who have joined us online via MMA social media portals. For the benefit of our guests and invitees from various organizations, it gives me immense pleasure in that MMA, which was established in 1956, has evolved today as the largest management association in the country with over 8,000 members spread across 12 chapters in Tamil Nadu and Pondicherry. MMA has been awarded the Best Management Association in the country for 15 times in a row, including the previous year, 24-25. The global supply chain landscape is undergoing a profound transformation. Rising geopolitical tensions, trade realignments, and quest for resilience have pushed multinational corporations to diversify beyond China, a strategy now termed widely as China+1. What began as a contingency plan has evolved into a structural imperative. In 2025, giants like Apple, HP, and Dell shifted production to India, Vietnam, and Mexico, seeking resilience, lower costs, and reduced geopolitical risks. For India, this moment is particularly consequential. In this context, India has emerged as a pivotal player offering scale, a growing manufacturing ecosystem, skilled labor, and a youthful demographic. 28.4% of the population under the age of 30. The country offers both a vast domestic market and low-cost talent. Electronics production alone has surged from rupees 2.13 lakh crore in the financial year 21 to 5.25 lakh crores in the year 2025 under PLI support, signaling genuine industrial deepening. India's services backbone in IT, logistics, and finance adds a competitive layer that pure manufacturing rivals cannot easily replicate. Even in defense, manufacturing India is emerging as a credible exporter, with BrahMos missiles already shipped to Philippines and discussions on with other nations. Yet, challenges remain. Replicating China's deeply integrated ecosystem built over decades cannot be achieved in a few policy cycles. Logistics costs, land acquisitions, hurdles, and regulatory divergence continue to raise the cost of doing business. Global companies need reliable, scalable, and cost-competitive alternatives. To seize this opportunity, India must urgently convert its demographic and policy advantages into world-class manufacturing infrastructure before competitors like Vietnam and Indonesia consolidate their own positions. This evening's discussion will explore how India can leverage the China+1 momentum to integrate more deeply into global value chains while navigating the risks and responsibilities of an increasingly fragmented world economy. I'm sure our distinguished speakers will address these issues in details, and the interactions with Mr. Josh will be insightful for all of us gathered here and those watching alive. I once again welcome my colleagues from the Managing Committee, members of MMA, and distinguished invitees, partner organizations, and viewers across the globe. Wishing you all a very productive evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Manoj, for delivering the opening remarks and setting the context. Now I'm going to have the privilege of introducing a distinguished panel for this evening. Let me have the introduction of Mr. Dr. Srinivas, Frank, and Josh. Then you'll know the background of this gentleman, you'll know what is going to be there for this evening. It'll be a great insights on the subject which are going to be discussed. Can I have the AV, please?
Dr. P.S. Srinivas is a visiting research professor at the East Asian Institute, National University of Singapore, specializing in China's financial sector. Dr. Srinivas brings extensive global experience from roles at the New Development Bank, World Bank, and Asian Development Bank, along with teaching stints at the Indian School of Business. A Cornell PhD and IIM Ahmedabad alumnus, Dr. Srinivas is also an avid scuba diver and FA certified private pilot. Dr. Frank N. Pieke is a Dutch cultural anthropologist and visiting research professor at the East Asian Institute, National University of Singapore, specializing in modern China studies. A former professor at Leiden University and ex-CEO of Merix, Dr. Frank has led major academic and policy initiatives on China's global impact. His research focuses on China-EU relations, migration, and the Chinese Communist Party, and Dr. Frank is the author of several acclaimed books on contemporary China. Mr. Josh Foulger is President, IT Hardware and New Projects at Dixon Technologies India Limited, leading its expansion in the electronics and computing sectors. With over 30 years of global ESDM experience, Mr. Josh has held leadership roles at Zetwork, Foxconn, Bharat FIH, and Nokia, driving large-scale manufacturing growth. Known for his strategic 4Es leadership approach, Mr. Josh specializes in scaling high-growth businesses and building resilient, world-class teams.
That's a panel, I mean, a warm round of applause to welcome our panel, and you're going to have an inspiring insights on India in the China+1 era, and especially navigating global supply chains amid shifting geopolitics. I know supply chain is one issue which everybody discusses, and I always hear from all the speakers who speak that the cost of supply chain in India is highest. How can you bring it down? We know we have a lot of solution to be found today, and now I request Frank will be sharing the insights, followed by Srinivas, then we'll have a free-flowing conversation. Josh will share insights. Over to you, Mr. Frank, and looking forward to keenly hearing your insight. Over to you, Mr. Frank.
Right. Let's get my stopwatch right so that I won't overshoot my time. So thank you very much for being here. I was here before a half year ago together with my colleague Srinivas. Some of the things I will say now will also have been said last time round, but I think much has happened since, so there's plenty new content there as well. So I'd like to start with an overview of Chinese politics and Chinese governance, and then moving into China's economic strategy, Chinese economic development trajectory as well. So starting with Xi Jinping's administration, the key things of his three administrations have been that he was extremely critical and distrustful of what his predecessors had done to the Communist Party and to China. He has called in public them people who have brought the Chinese Communist Party to the brink of extinction, and very urgent action was indeed required according to him. So one of the key planks of his policies, and many planks, but one of the key planks was building up the Communist Party again to a strong, unified, leading, disciplined, and so on and so forth, organization for China to bring China into a status that would eventually rival that of the United States. So that's a very important thing about China. They look at the economy and politics and world politics, geopolitical issues, in like an athlete would look at the Olympic Games. So there's only one prize at the finish line, that's the gold medal, and all the other medals don't really matter. And China wants to make absolutely sure that they win that gold medal. And that sometimes goes to ridiculous degrees, that they really want to excel and be number one in all kinds of things. Something you can also use against them, because you say, well, you know, this is something that China really lags behind, and they will go for it, you know, immediately. And if you then give them things to go after that really don't matter, you'll gain a leg up with them. Anyway, I'm being slightly facetious, but it is a mindset that is sometimes a bit scary, quite honestly. Another thing which is really important to Xi Jinping is the fact that the security apparatus in China he found to be extremely wanting. And he has based his rule squarely on China's security apparatus. And in that sense, he's a little bit like Stalin, actually. But of course, the nature of China's security apparatus is very different from that of the old Soviet Union. It revolves much more around the party rather than around the police. It revolves around party discipline. It revolves around the secret police also, but it also revolves around the state ministry for national security. That is the core of his power base at the moment. That also extends into the army. So his main power base into the army, apart from the military apparatus, or sorry, the party apparatus, is the discipline inspection committee of the military. That is his main entry point. So that's important to realize, that he is somebody that is obsessed by party building, obsessed by security, and obsessed by China's mission to bring China into a future that will make China the best and the strongest country in the world. Nevertheless, and that's point 4 here, and that's something that is always a surprise to people who don't know very much about China, China is still an extremely decentralized country. China is in many regards more decentralized than India. The central government and the central party apparatus can set policy preferences, they can come up with laws, they can come up with policy documents, they can say what has to happen, but they can't do very, very little. The doing is done in the provinces, so in what in India would be the states. That's where the doing happens, and even at lower levels. So that is really where policy turns into governance and government. You know, provinces in China, you should not forget, are really the size of Indian states, and some of them might be even slightly larger. So the other thing about it is that the people who run these provinces, the party secretaries and the governors, they are seasoned administrators, seasoned cadres in China's terminology. They are not politicians in the way we understand. So they've never been elected. They don't see politics as a separate vocation from administration. They are people that have been recruited in the public service and into the party, obviously, and then they have made a career in it, moving up in 30 or 40 years to eventually reach positions of real leadership. That's important for us because when we encounter, say, a governor or a party secretary of a province, this person is not a novice. This person is not a politician who needs to score points in an election. He is an administrator, or she is an administrator, who has to fulfill his or her key performance indicators, KPIs, that are laid out every year in his annual review. So in that sense, there are professionals, and they're people that you have to deal with very carefully, because their knowledge of the subject matter is is equal to that of a very good businessman, basically, and not that of a politician. Now, recently, China, more externally speaking, has moved into being almost obsessed, you can say, with external security. Of course, that has a lot to do with the competition with the United States, although the United States cannot be fully blamed for it because the Chinese started that competition as well about 15, 20 years ago. Nevertheless, now external security is an obsession for the leadership in Beijing. And China's foreign policy reach has become a major priority. However, this, what is called now major power diplomacy, has not yet achieved the level of ambition of wanting to rule the world or be the world's policeman. That is a role they very happily leave to the United States. China is still a regional power. Its main security issues are in the region, and that, unfortunately for you guys, includes India. But it also includes Russia, which is an interesting fact now that there's an unlimited partnership between China and Russia, but nevertheless, Russia is always also a neighbor and therefore also implicitly a security issue. And I say this because that partnership, that unlimited partnership, may get limited very, very quickly, maybe even overnight, if things change. And then suddenly China will find that they have territorial claims over Russia that date from the 19th century that will then become activated. So you can never trust the Chinese if they are your neighbor, unfortunately. In this sense, India has also a lot of commonalities with countries like Japan, South Korea, Taiwan, obviously, Vietnam, and other neighboring countries that I think Indian policymakers should not overlook. There's more commonality than you may think. But as I said, this ambition doesn't go beyond the region. So they don't want to throw their weight about, militarily speaking, or in terms of defense, beyond what they perceive to be their neighborhood. However, this neighborhood keeps on expanding. That is the bad news. And the Americans know this, particularly into the West Pacific. It keeps on expanding, but also, of course, in what is called the Indo-Pacific. And that is, of course, when it gets global. Now I would like to say a few things about the Chinese leadership. And the changes in there. So you may have noticed in the press that this is a slightly difficult to read slide. It doesn't matter. the names on it and the specific dates. It's just an overview of the top leadership in China. And the key thing about this is that there has been a lot of changes. In the last 3-4 years, a lot of purges on the grounds of corruption in particular. Corruption is always a stick to beat anybody in Chinese politics. If you don't like somebody, you say he or she is corrupt, and then that's the way of getting rid of it. That's also where the party discipline system kicks in and does its dirty job. But the key thing is that there have been a lot of changes in the leadership. They have had two effects. The first one is that Xi Jinping is increasingly only relying on a very few people to run the country. I would say there are 2 or 3 other leaders that he really fully trusts. Well, perhaps three more, but there are 2 really important people, Xi Jinping himself, and then the other one is THEJO, number 6 in the Politburo, and the guy who basically runs the entire party top apparatus. He's like the chief of staff of the Chinese Communist Party. Those are the 2 top leaders, and my interest really is on THEJO, and I want to see if he will survive the next party congress in 2027, because he's getting on a little bit, so he will actually have to retire. And my question is, will he be made to retire? There are a couple of other people in economic sphere, for instance, which is important to you. Economic policy making in China is not a matter of professional economists, unfortunately, but they are basically party hacks who make the decisions about this. And this also explains some of the mistakes they are making in their economic policy. Final point is, before I turn to the economy, is that there have been a lot of changes. The personnel base for Xi Jinping's power has been eroded. He relies on very few people now, but despite this, I don't expect any policy changes in the next years, even with and after the next party congress in 27. It will be different people. Again, they have to be different people because there's so few left. But they will, in my view, continue to do basically the same things they already have done over the last 10 years or so. So don't hold your breath for any changes. Now I'd like to turn to the economy. Now, China's growth model, you probably have picked up a few things about that in your own work. The key thing about China's growth model is that there is no model. The Chinese don't have a model, and they've had a model. It was just a matter of practically trying things out and seeing if they worked. If they don't work, abandon them. If they do work, build on them. And as such, this model gradually emerged, but it was never designed. Nobody ever sat down and said, okay, this is how we're going to do it. Despite the fact that the Chinese in their propaganda now say there is a Chinese model, and we believe that other countries, particularly in the developing world, they should emulate our model because it's proven that it works. We have shown how it works. We've seen the light, and now we want to bring the light to you. That's actually pure propaganda. They don't have a model. They just post facto invented that model based on this idea of a non-democratic authoritarian governance model, saying that that is really the key to our success. It's not. It's very simple, and it's just invention, a post hoc invention. Now, I will not discuss the various aspects of the growth model as it may exist, but important about is that there has been since 2020 roughly an increased reliance again on China's state-owned enterprises, on the state-owned sector, on Chinese industrial policy, so the idea that you can guide the economy, you can lead the economy, you can steer the economy, the key word here is steer the economy. In that sense, a planned economy mindset has returned to a certain extent, so the economy can be made, can be directed, can be targeted towards specific objectives, and the main objective, of course, China's strength and China's supremacy in 2050. But that happens not through old-fashioned planning and orders, basically, and quota, but through the market system, using the private sector as much as the state-owned sector, and through financialization of politics and policies. So financial incentives are used, subsidies, venture capital, investment corporations, and so on and so forth. China's financial system is really mobilized and used now to steer the economy in the directions that the party leadership wants. And that also means, of course, that they have to be a little careful because money wants to make a profit, so they can't fully do exactly what they want. They have to always keep that bottom line in mind. But the key thing is that they are not simply pushing a button and say, do this, but rather they're designing a system of financial incentives that then helps them steer the economy. What is very important, and that's very underappreciated in understanding Chinese economy, is that China's banking and financial system is absolutely massive. It is, okay, watch out, 60 trillion US dollars large. It's amazing. It is three times the size of the entire GDP of China, which is unparalleled anywhere else in the world. Now that means China is sitting on a huge amount of money that needs an outlet, that needs something to do. So they can provide these incentives because money is looking for ways, capital is looking for ways to be invested. But also for us abroad, it's important. Money is sloshing out in China. It's also looking for an outlet outside of China, right? There is too much money in China, and it needs a way out. It needs to find ways to make a profit. And it doesn't matter that that profit may be substandard globally, but it needs to make a profit. That's also important for you business guys. If you're smart, you borrow money in China or you raise capital in China and you invest it elsewhere. It's because interests are really, really low in China, and much lower than here or in many other countries. And the capital is keen, is willing, wants to be invested, wants to make a profit. A very important fact that is quite often overlooked. And this is possible, by the way, because China has been consistently over the last 20, 30 years has been depressing consumption and has been emphasizing investment. So consumers and savers in particular, both institutional savers and individual savers, have been basically screwed out of their money, out of a profit, out of a return on their capital. You make very, very little return on your capital in China as an investor or as a saver, and that money can't go anywhere because it can't go abroad immediately. There's capital controls, right? So it has to stay in China. So people have to be satisfied with a very low rate of return on their capital, on their savings. And that money is then recycled into the economy in ways that government wants, particularly local government, investing it in infrastructure, investing it in long-term projects, investing it in industrial policy now increasingly. That's made possible because they're sitting on this heap of capital that has been building up over the last 30, 35 years. Now this also leads us to some strengths and weaknesses about the Chinese economy. I think you probably have heard about many of them. The strengths are an industrial capacity that, and we just heard that in the introduction, is truly unparalleled. The supply chains, both in terms of their depth and in terms of their size and quality, are unparalleled anywhere in the world. In fact, unparalleled in history. There's no country that has had this. They've got a fantastic infrastructure, including electricity supply and all that, and increasingly an enormous innovation capacity. That is what they really focus on now, innovation, and again, innovation. They've become an S&T stronghold in the world. So the old Western idea in particular that the Chinese come out to steal our technology and steal our IP, and our excellence is completely outdated. In fact, it's now the other way around, and Western companies go to China for the latest inventions and the latest ideas and the latest innovation. Now, there's many, many weaknesses. I don't have time to go into them that much, but it is important that China is facing some really, really rough times, but on the whole, they are policy-induced. Intrinsically and organically, the Chinese economy is still very strong, is as strong as it's ever been, but policy is making it difficult to grow even faster. with policy adjustments, which also means, unfortunately for the leadership, strategic adjustments, so they shouldn't be in a hurry to achieve greatness as they have been, but without that, they could do way, way better. But they have made a strategic choice. Economic growth is fine, but it's not the top priority. Economic growth is trumped now by national strength, national prowess, and all the eyes are directed on the future. So the growth model that they have is now one of supply side economics rather than Keynesian consumption-driven growth. Now, in that sense, you can also see China at the moment as a massive economics experiment. Now, will this extreme supply chain side economics model, driven by innovation, driven by new sectors, will that actually in the longer term deliver or not? Or will it fall flat on its face eventually? Will it generate enough, and this means that my time is up, so I will stop here in a minute. But will this new model actually deliver what they say it will deliver? They say it will, the leadership says it will. I'm not so sure. There may actually be much rougher times ahead for the growth model, but the question really is not only who is right and who is wrong, but it's also a matter of timing. How long will it take for this supply chain model, innovation model, to yield the results that they want? Now, even if it yields the results, however, it is important to bear in mind that that new model will only apply to a very small part of China, the most developed part of China, the East Coast. China is already and will increasingly split into two Chinas. A China that is doing very well, that is growing, that is developing, is becoming the envy of the world, perhaps even with living standards that are probably higher than in the United States at the moment in 10 years from now. And then there's the other China that lags behind, is left behind, and has to make do with the living standards they have today or even worse. That is, to me, almost a certainty that will happen. But the thing is, the leadership doesn't care, because they care only about the winners. They care about strength, they care about the future, and not about the presence. Now, I have much more to say, but I will be disciplined and stop here and hand over to Professor Srinivas for the really interesting things.
Okay, good evening to all of you. Good evening, Captain Vijay Kumar. Once again, thank you for the invitation to come back here again. Really appreciate it and great to be back here and addressing all of you, those in the room and those online. After the overview of what's happening in China that Frank has given, I'm going to turn to the main findings of our research. Last time when I was here 6 months ago, we sort of shared with you what we were planning to do, and now what I would like to share with you is what have we found, and we'd like to get your feedback and get your thoughts on what you think, hopefully whether this is going to be useful for the private sector, for India, or for the government, etc. So just to give you a quick background, our work is grounded in 50 structured interviews that we conducted under Chatham House rules, so hopefully that allowed honest conversations with C-suite executives across manufacturing and service sectors. They covered global companies, Indian companies, and Chinese companies. And we also spoke to senior policymakers. We complemented what we found in these interviews with quantitative data from India, from China, and from other China+1 markets. So the central thesis of my presentation, this is kind of the climax of the movie, India is not replacing China, but it is becoming a strategic complement in global firms' China+1 strategies. So this is essentially portfolio diversification on the part of companies, not a decoupling from China. Okay. So let's actually, put us all on the same page, define what China+1 actually means. It emerged in the early 2000s as firms diversified as China labor cost rose in China, and they wanted risk exposure to be diversified from coastal China. But it exploded after 2018 with the beginning of the US-China trade war, the export controls, COVID-19 factory stoppages that we've heard of, supply chain and currency weaponization. These were all geopolitics were the driving factors. And single country dependencies became national security issues and became supply chain liabilities. So the outcome is a portfolio strategy to diversify supply chains, adding resilience, not isolation, but adding a resilience, adding redundancy, and adding optionality while keeping significant China presence. So it's not about decoupling, it's about strategic rebalancing, establishing additional manufacturing or sourcing bases in complementary locations. So crucially for most firms, the goal is not China replacement, but looking at multi-node production and sourcing networks that include India. So China remains critical for its many issues, some of them Frank touched on, R&D sophistication and its massive domestic market. For example, Apple still derives nearly 20% of its revenue from China. So the opportunity is important for India because global boardrooms are now looking at resilience alongside cost and market access. So this raises two issues for India. First, attracting China+1 investments from global firms to India. And second, and this is required for India to meet its own development and economic growth objectives, Viksit Bharat 2047. We would all like that has a strong China component involved in it. And the second factor is diversifying sourcing dependence for India away from China. So those are two issues that matter for India. So, but why does India matter for global firms? And India matters because of its scale, because of its talent, and because of its policy traction. So it's a 1.4 billion domestic market, rivaling China's. Median age is 29, China's is 41. Several of our interviewees told us that India's scale justifies capex investments that smaller nations simply cannot support for its own domestic market. India produces 2.5 million STEM graduates annually. We know that there are issues with varying quality, but this is still a major strength. And India also has a large and vibrant startup ecosystem. The production-linked incentives, PLI schemes, seem to be delivering. Electronics components have surged, as was mentioned by Manoj, and from near zero to about $25 billion, dozens of factories. Apple's story is, of course, well known. We have a representative sitting right here. The pharma is another. Some respondents told us that PLI made the difference between pilot and scale. And of course, PLI has its share of critics, we know that, but on the ground, it is attracting investments. So, India also uniquely supports a Made in India for India strategy, where its middle-class consumers justify capacity without export reliance, and selective export growth in certain sectors. So it also supports targeting competitive exports of what we call good enough products. So products to other developing countries, products to Africa, products to Latin America, where the consumers may be more price sensitive and not just high spec products to developed markets. So unlike smaller Asian alternatives in the China+1 strategy of global firms, India offers both production scale and market demand. So other destinations, for example, Vietnam, they may be geared towards optimizing exports, but India de-risks with home consumption. And no other China+1 destination actually matches what India can offer. But that said, here is a trade-off that investors are weighing, global investors are weighing. China, as was mentioned earlier, has unmatched mature ecosystem, some of the world's best infrastructure, but it has rising labor costs, 20%, 30% or more wage premium versus India. Geopolitical tensions that we all know about, they are driving many global firms to diversify from China. Many Chinese firms have their own China+1 strategies. They are also going out of China and moving into other China+1 destinations, for example, ASEAN. So even though the primary driver in their cases may be tariff arbitrage now, it was cost earlier, maybe tariff arbitrage now. So if you look at Vietnam as another possibility, another very attractive destination for China+1, it's got export-focused efficiency, improving logistics, but it's a mid-sized market. Its GDP is about a tenth of India, roughly speaking. Capacity constraints are already emerging in Vietnam in ports and logistics as it absorbs a lot of FDI since 2020. Thailand, it has a stable automotive industrial hub, strong regional integration, moderate costs, but a similarly mid-sized market and less demographic dividend than India has. So India stands out, primary role as huge, access to a huge market, very large scale, positive demographics and strong domestic demand. So all of this said, where does India fall short then in the scheme of things when people are assessing China+1 destinations? All our interviewees shared considerable frustration in several areas, and some of you may share that. First, the well-known bureaucratic complexity across both central and state government levels, and this is despite government trying to improve the ease of doing business over many, many years. Some infrastructure issues, just as in some examples. Industrial electricity, on paper, if you compare per unit, per megawatt costs actually compare are similar to that in China, but that's only on paper. Actual experience costs are much higher for businesses in India for a variety of reasons, including creating backup capacity, etc., and that can lead to power costs 20% or more higher than China. Logistics costs. The government of India, DPIIT, has released a report that says that India's logistics costs are 8% of GDP, 7.97 to be precise. China has released a report saying its logistics costs are 13.5% of GDP. I will leave it at that in terms of what it is that the experienced cost in India is, what India is saying and what China is saying. So clearly the experienced cost in India on logistics is much higher than what we see as reported. Interviews also told us compliance costs are substantial, and some of you here who lead industry, who lead businesses may agree. There's also geographic concentration risk. 60% of India's FDI comes into 4 states, Maharashtra, Karnataka, Gujarat, Tamil Nadu, right here. Single window approval systems, reliable power, cleared land, pre-cleared land banks. These are just examples of issues where there is enormous unevenness across states. And as a corollary, ecosystem development is also uneven across these 4 and many of the other states. In order to develop advanced manufacturing skills, supply chain depth development, etc., takes 5+ years, as many respondents told us, sometimes even a decade, even with a lot of focus. Some of the early Korean entrants into Tamil Nadu invested a decade or more building up their supply chains. Batteries and EVs could take as much or longer today. So there needs to be a realism in terms of time horizon as to what you can accomplish in India. So these are some of the considerations that businesses are thinking about when they look at India as a China+1 destination. And we can't really wish these away. Execution and policy gaps you can actually quantify. So India is chosen as a China+1 destination when firms need a second node serving a large domestic market, which has the potential to improve its resilience, and the companies can deepen their supply chains over time. India is not chosen because it is the cheapest alternative to China, to be very clear about that. But on the other hand, while Vietnam might win on short-term assembly, India is positioned for decades-long growth, and this is what attracts firms. So India's job now essentially is to convert this market access into long-term manufacturing strength. So, what did we find in our research? First, India is benefiting from China+1. That's a very clear message. It is benefiting, but substantially less than what it could, substantially less than what it could get. And the gap is quite significant. Just to give you put some numbers on this, India attracted $81 billion of FDI in 24-25, almost all of it from non-Chinese firms. So as a comparison, ASEAN, and just to put picture, the 10 countries across the ASEAN group, roughly the same GDP as India, half the population, attracted 3 times the GDP, 3 times the FDI. Okay, so half the population, roughly the same GDP overall, 3 times the FDI. And China is now the largest investor in ASEAN. So as I mentioned, Chinese firms have their own China+1 strategy. They are investing in ASEAN. And now China invests 3 times as much in ASEAN as the traditional leaders, US, Korea, and Japan used to. So it's very, very big, the move out, or at least diversification from China into ASEAN as a China+1 destination by Chinese firms. If you look at firms that are headquartered in the OECD countries, the rich countries, they invest pre-COVID, they would invest twice as much in China as they invested in ASEAN. In 5 years, they invest 2.5 times now more in ASEAN than they invest in China. It's flipped completely in 5 years' time. So when you look at the firms that are headquartered in the OECD countries. So this just give you a scale of the gap between what India could and what India is attracting. So, but that said, India is clearly on the map for global firms looking for an additional base alongside China. So the interest of global investors is there, the investment activity is there too, but the conversion rate from interest to large-scale sustained investment is still too low. Now, what we also found was sectors, the firm's strategies are very sector specific, and this might be obvious to many of you who run businesses. A pharmaceuticals firm thinks very differently from an electronics firm, thinks very differently from a services firm. Each faces very different issues, very different constraints, very different opportunities. So these have to be assessed at a very micro level as far as China+1 investments are concerned. The other finding, across the board, companies looking to India as a China+1 destination find the made in India for India model as a genuine strength. They look at India's growing middle class, they look at India's high consumption to GDP ratio, and it makes it attractive to these firms to invest in India even without exports. Another finding, state level governance and execution matter as much as national policy. Investment is very local, even if it may be for either the national or the global market. So it's very critical, the state level governance and execution. And again and again and again, we heard the same thing from businesses across our interviews. China dependence for India remains inevitable in the medium term. There is no way we are getting out from our economic relationship with China. For most firms, especially electronics, automotive, complex manufacturing, China remains central for components, for supplier ecosystems, and for the domestic market. So the realistic question for India at the policy level is not, can India replace China? It cannot. Not in the next decade, for sure, probably not even for longer. But it is, can India become the most credible complement to China in the global supply chains? And there the answer is yes, it can, subject to a long list of things. And we'll come to some of those. So geopolitics clearly shapes the context, but like the trade war, technology controls, etc., all of these push firms to diversify. But the important thing to keep in mind for the Indian policymakers in particular is when executives sit down to make their investment decisions, the primary drivers are still cost, speed, reliability, access to talent. Geopolitics is an accelerator. It's not the only engine that drives investments. So, just to conclude this slide, India is not a replacement for China. It is a strategic complement, and this is in a world where the firms need both. So how are firms adapting in India? In basically 4 ways is what we found in our research. They start with assembly in India and then deepen localization later. So for example, some of the Apple started with assembly, now it's around 20% local value addition, aiming for about 30 to 40% over the next 5 years. Similar thing as an experience for some of the large Korean manufacturers that came in much earlier. Second, corporate strategy has evolved from cost efficiency to resilience. So firms are now using basically multi-sourcing to balance resilience, cost, and market access. And nearly 2/3 of the firms that we spoke to are implementing these multi-sourcing strategies. And interestingly, some firms told us they base themselves, for them, exporting to Africa from Chennai is cheaper than shipping goods from here to Delhi. So therefore, they are even looking at different, setting up different facilities in different parts of India to diversify risk and lower their own costs across the Indian market itself. So that's one in terms of looking at corporate strategies. Companies also rely on local partnerships via joint ventures to navigate Indian regulation and to navigate execution risk. Firms are also tailoring products. They are tailoring products for India. They are tailoring products to be made in India for other emerging markets, for other developing countries, and they are not doing it just copying whatever they are doing it in China. They are tailoring products for these markets, and given their price and the price sensitivity of these markets. So many companies are looking at India as a base to export good enough products to other developing markets. So the most common pattern is that firms are beginning with a made in India for India strategy, and then later on they're moving into exports either to developed markets or to good enough products for the other emerging markets. So on the basis of all these findings, what should policy actually do? Our first set of recommendations is about balancing protection and competitiveness. So in 2020, India for investment from China, India released Press Note 3. There was COVID, there was Galwan. They are very understandable response at the time. But 2 months ago, in March, India moved to a much more targeted risk-based system. Investments only above a 10% beneficial ownership or those involving control trigger screening. There's a fast-track 60-day mechanism for certain key sectors. So this shift in our view is important. And just to let you know, our research was completed before March 10th. So had this talk been before March 10th, we would have had exactly the same recommendations. Strongly supports what India is doing. Ring fence genuinely sensitive sectors, open up more in non-strategic areas, attract capital, technology, and capability, and send a signal to the world that you don't close down and you can manage security concerns in a way while keeping yourself open to these, to capital, technology, and capability. So this is sort of on the Press Note 3 issue, which has been a significant factor in the India-China relations. But beyond Press Note 3, there's a much broader competitiveness agenda. If India wants to anchor more China+1 investments, it has to address cost disadvantages, especially power and logistics. There is no getting away from that, and continuing to simplify a regulatory environment. So the message basically is calibrated openness plus lower operating frictions. It's a powerful tool to attract more investments. The second set of recommendations focuses on institutions and implementation. So we've seen how FDI is concentrated in 4 states, 60% in 4 states. So that tells us 2 things. One, national framework is important, but also state level governance and capacity are decisive. So we argue for 3 priorities in this area. First, expand and strengthen single window approval systems and make them really credible. So what investors fear most is not tax rates, but uncertainty and delays. So if the 21-day approvals that we see here in Tamil Nadu can actually become a standard across the country, India's best practice is available in India itself. It doesn't need to look in any other country. So India's attractiveness to China+1 investment rises sharply. Build supplier ecosystems through targeted support. Right now, PLI supports volume and capacity. At some point, PLI needs, and it has been successful in doing that. But should the objectives remain the same, or should the objectives of PLI themselves evolve into supporting deeper value addition, into supporting deeper supply chain creation and local supplier development? So these are the kind of things that policy needs to think about, looking at the future of PLI, and and understanding the fact that these things take a long time to develop for firms that are coming here. And the third is diffuse the FDI-friendly environment beyond the 4-star states. Looking at state-level benchmarking, use competitive federalism, publish comparable metrics for actual approval times, infrastructure quality, contract enforcement, name and shame kind of thing, and hopefully that might drive more competition among states. So the bottom line here is how India implements policy at the state level will determine whether China+1 benefits are concentrated in a few states or are truly broad-based across India. The third pillar of our recommendations is trade strategy, and this links India tightly to global and regional value chains. So firms are not just diversifying production, they are rewiring entire value chains across countries. So for India to be a serious node in those chains, market access and rules of origin matter a great deal. So we recommend accelerating the implementation, not just the negotiation, but the implementation of the India-UK, India-EU FTA agreements. Complete the review of the ASEAN-India FTA that has been under review for a significant period of time. We understand there are key issues, but whatever progress needs to be made. And continue moving more towards investment-anchored FTAs. So trade and investment policy, in our view, needs to be designed together, not in separate silos. Basically, because an investor, a China+1 investor, deciding on a location today is essentially asking, if I put a factory in India, can I reach other markets in a predictable way? And the more India can answer yes to that question, the more attractive it becomes relative to the Vietnams and relative to the Thailands of the world. So trade policy needs to be an enabler of China+1 investment, not an afterthought. So trade and investment policies set the overall frame, but even within that, India then needs to decide where it wants to build its depth. So the fourth pillar of our recommendations is sector strategy. So our research basically suggests that India should not try to do, as the recent hit movie said, everything, everywhere, all at once. Don't try that. Okay, focus. And focus on sectors where it can move up the ladder, focus on moving from assembly to manufacturing, to integrated manufacturing plus services. This includes things like electronics, where PLI has already had a visible impact, advanced manufacturing, and areas where India can, as I mentioned, supply good enough products for other emerging markets, leveraging its cost structure and scale. So, and at the same time, try to build domestic supply chains to reduce over-reliance on imported intermediates, and especially from a single country, China. And this will be crucial for India's own resilience. So the emphasis needs to be in India choosing sectors where it can realistically build capability and resilience, not just capacity. And so this, in a sense, it brings us back to the question of how India realistically manages its China relationship. Frank touched upon the context of that in terms of what's happening in China, but as I mentioned, our interviewees told us near-term dependence on China is unavoidable, whether we like it or not, especially for inputs and components. So we asked the question, how do we hedge intelligently over time? We cannot cut off China from India. So we suggest a combination of pragmatic engagement in non-sensitive sectors, deliberate diversification, building alternative sources of critical inputs, and through partnerships with non-China suppliers. So in a sense, India needs to figure out its own China+1 strategy, but applied to sourcing. So that India becomes less dependent on China. So, and one important point to be kept in mind here is India has border issues with China, but India is not the only country that has border issues with China. Japan has border issues with China. Vietnam has border issues with China, and they have had some success in figuring out how to create a balance between economics and politics, and we need to figure that out too. There is a sweet spot out somewhere. We need to figure that out. We haven't got there yet, but that's our recommendation. We are not politicians, but I'm sure the people who know that will figure out how to do that better. So let me end with a conclusion. China+1 is about resilience and rebalancing. It's not about a clean break from China. India has a very strong value proposition. It also has major structural constraints. So if India sustains reform, lowers the cost of doing business, uncertainty of doing business, deepens supplier ecosystems, and manages the China relationship pragmatically, China+1 can become a durable source of growth and resilience for India, for Indian and global firms, and for the global economy. So the way forward is to see India as a complement, as a strategic complement to China, as a country that global firms can add to their footprint to manage risk and to tap growth while still relying on China for many functions in the medium term. So according to us, two things will decide how far India can go in that role: policy and execution. And two stakeholders in the economy will decide how far it can go: the government and some of you who are the leaders of Indian industry. Thank you.
Group Captain Vijay Kumar, it's a pleasure to be back in America. It's great to listen to Manoj, Frank, and Srinivas talk about, I think before walking in, we said, Srinivas challenged me, asked me, Josh, you can violently disagree. It was remarkable convergence in our thoughts. So, but let me highlight a few things in my observations from my experiences in actually, I should say, running businesses and operations in India and a little bit outside India. See, I think globally, what's happening is we have G7 is now becoming G2. You know, it's just one popular term. It's G2 is India not in the picture. A lot of us like to think G2 is India, maybe one of these days. It's actually US and China. And this is driven by, obviously, technology, power, economic power, and military power. So I think these are the largest economies in the world, 35 trillion, 20 trillion. India is 4.5 or 4, you know, so I think now there's a lot of tit for tat which is happening in terms of trade and economics between the US, and the US brings in export controls. China responded 2 weeks ago, or last week, I think it's 2 weeks ago, by Article 834 and 835, which restricts technology transfers out of China. So the world has suddenly gone from being convergent, flat standards to divergence. We see this in electronics. The big question in the telecom space is, what is 6G going to look like? So I come from about 17, 18 years in Nokia, And when I was in the US, we used to have a protocol called TDMA. And then came CDMA, and then was Europe had GSM, and Korea had their own standard. So maybe 6G is going to be different, because Nokia and Ericsson are forming a 6G standard. Huawei is driving something else. So we don't know. There is duplicate capacity being built today around the world. A lot of the world's capacity was in China, has been built over the last 25, 30 years. But now there is, because of corporate pressure, because of trade dynamics, duplicate capacity is being built. People call it China+1. So that's sort of what we see happening globally. I think India has, since independence, I would say, this is probably the second time India has had a long-term vision. Atmanirbhar Bharat 2047. I think it's a very bold vision. And I think it's very pragmatic. It's pragmatically built. It's too long for some of us to envision what that will look like. And I feel that it's built on market access. India is a large market. India is 1.4 billion people now. We're the largest. India will be 1.6 billion by the time 2047 comes. China will be a Europe away, China will be 1.2 billion people by 2047. So India can and will become very large, there. Now, what should we, I think, do? And so here's where maybe it's not a divergence from your view. I believe in not boiling the ocean. I believe that we should create islands of excellence. About 20 years ago when I came back to India, a lot of people think I was deported back from the US. I was not. I volunteered to come back from the US to start Nokia. China had 2 factories at the time. And India was considered the software power at the time, software services power, okay? I don't think we did software products at that time, but so we come to start, we landed up in India, Chennai, and I was petrified. I was 34 years old at the time and petrified that whether we can pull this off. We built something in 220 acres. We bought suppliers. We built a beautiful team. One of the guys is sitting here, Ratnavel. I think at peak in 2011, Ratna packed 1.5 million phones on one heavy day to 110 countries, right? We had suppliers, Chinese suppliers. BYD was here. I bought BYD to India. Foxconn was one of my suppliers at the time. So we were regularly clocking 7 phones a second, right in one factory, right there in Sriperumbudur. We were about 8 to 10% cheaper than China, bill of material, COGS as we say, So India can create that island of excellence. Now, the characteristic was there was one global value chain called Nokia, which took a call to come to India. It was actually a trial. They thought I will fail. I think a lot of people, I don't want to say who, but betted that we will fail. We didn't. We failed later for other reasons, which is, sort of the EODB topic. That's for another evening. So I think India can create this island of excellence. Right? The second point I think India should do is be very pragmatic. We should approach GVCs like Nokia. Apple is a great example. It's here, it's right between here and Bangalore. We have the entire value chain slowly getting built. Or rather, I should say, very quickly getting built, so all things considered in India. So Tamil Nadu actually has one of the most valuable supply chains in the world today. And I think the second thing, and I think this is very important, is that Indians and India should have a higher ambition. I think I was stating an example about 25 years ago when I was in China, evening over dinner with one of my Chinese suppliers. And this was in Guangzhou, which is Shenzhen, and the state or province of Guangzhou. And China was probably a 1.5 trillion economy, or maybe a 1 trillion economy at that time. That Guangzhou wanted to be bigger than Japan. Japan was number 2 at that time. Today, Shanghai, professor was saying, Shanghai is 870 billion, Shanghai alone. So I think India should have that ambition. Indians should have that ambition. Tamil Nadu should have that ambition. Why are we competing against, another state in India? Why we say that there are only 4 states? I think our FDI should be compared to, Tamil Nadu is about the same size as Thailand. Actually, if you look, the latitude of Bangkok and Chennai are the same. So, we have equal number of beaches as well in Chennai. So, just need to go a little south here, So why not? So I think this ambition, is one thing, right? Now, it can be done. I had the privilege of starting Nokia with like-minded people. I had the privilege of restarting Foxconn in India. I helped a startup for about a couple of years. We built something. And today I'm in the largest Indian manufacturer. Dixon Technologies is today number 13 in global scale. We are about $5 billion. A lot of the growth has happened in the last 5 years, and Dixon's growth is absolutely a tribute to Indian policy, Indian government's policy, and our execution of that. So I think corporate response from India is there. The ambition is big. Dixon, as an example, has about 25 locations in India, 6.5 million square feet. It's going to become 8 very soon. We're building India's largest computer factory in Oragadam. And so I think it's possible. So I'll leave you with this. I think we have to be pragmatic. Partnership with China, lessons learned from China, other geographies, or all of these things are good. But I think we just need to have an ambition and an execution which matches this ambition, which I think has been done. So right here in Chennai. So thank you. So I guess the first question, one of us can answer is, what are the biggest risks India must address to become a reliable global supply chain partner? I think not lose trust, I think is important, because trust is a very valuable commodity in supply chains. So you promise something you cannot go back on. So I think that's probably the first thing. So commit to things which you can do and then make it happen. So I feel, and this is something I joke with my team, and a couple of them are sitting here. I think, they're going to close their ears now. And I just said that, when there's our internal meeting, I said, I expect you guys to be there 2 minutes before. Because I'll be there in the meeting most of the time, 3 minutes before, right? And that reflects on our client meetings as well. So, and when you're there in the meeting, be prepared, right? Don't read the slide, right? You hit the highlights, right? So I think trust backing up with whatever we say, I think is important. So.
Okay, I guess the second question has a clear, how do geopolitical tensions impact financial stability in Asia, and how prepared is India to respond? Maybe I can start with the second question. I think India is well prepared to respond. So that's sort of the one sentence answer. Over the last several years, our banking sector has become significantly stronger than it was earlier. It is in a much better position to take on any shocks. Our overall economic management at the central government level is much stronger today than it was over the last, maybe a decade or beyond that ago. So overall, India, it's clear India does face a lot of shock. I mean, if anything, India is maybe bearing the brunt of the shock, given the dependence on both oil and other, including things like fertilizer, etc., from the Middle East. So India is facing it. But is India in a good position to handle it? Yes, it is. And I'm sure you must have read a lot of the press that Asia actually is bearing the brunt of the shock of the current. I'm focusing on what's happening in Iran. Talking about overall geopolitics is too big a subject, and it's a subject for its own seminar. But Asia is struggling. There's no question. Many countries are, but at the same time, managing. And India, I think, amongst all of them, India is facing its set of challenges, but it's well positioned to be able to deal with those challenges.
Right, so the question for me is, how do EU-China dynamics influence opportunities for India in global trade? It's actually a very complicated question. It's not a straightforward one. From a European perspective, at the moment, unfortunately, everything is colored by a very large roadblock called Ukraine. You can't talk about anything regarding China or India or the US or whatever without talking about the war in Ukraine. Gets to the point of an obsession. So whatever we say about India's opportunities that may arise from China-EU relationship, it will go through that filter. And that means several things. First of all, that yes, Europe is now looking more at China. Not really all that willingly, quite honestly. Just 2 weeks ago, I had extensive conversations in Brussels with people that are responsible for China policy making there, and it's very clear that yes, they are now, having received their marching orders, to be looking for engagement with China, and they will, and they do, but their heart isn't really into it. They really don't want it anymore, but they have to. They do realize that they have to. So any rapprochement between between China and the EU will be a transactional one, will be one based on perceived interests, but also be based on the conviction that there is a chronic, enduring geopolitical rivalry with China. Not in a military sense, but economically and also in terms of systems. Europe is still very much wedded to this idea of systemic rivalry with China. So Europe has a democratic, open, liberal, human rights, and so on and so forth, a climate, add all these things, all the good things, basically. That's us in Europe, and China is its exact opposite. And that's being said despite the fact that there are many facts that really falsify this idea. I mean, China isn't our direct opposite, but that is how it's being perceived. So, to return to India, I think India can do will do business with Europe, will forge better ties, but that will always be hamstrung by India's relationship with Russia. It's very, very simple because of the Ukraine dimension. And that is not going to be resolved, but it's going to mean that whatever happens between the EU and India will always be conditional, will always be partial, will never be a full partnership. I also spoke extensively with the same people about India, and they expressed continuing frustration about India's relationship with Russia, continuing frustration about India's intransigence regarding its own opening up its own market, all the usual chestnut issues keep on coming up. So I'm afraid that yes, these relationships will get better, have to get better. India and Europe will have to find complementarities, but it's going to be limited. Final point, if I may, is that I argued both in Delhi and in Brussels for a somewhat joined-up approach between between India and the EU regarding China. Because when you look at it sort of cold-faced, actually there are similarities there. They're very considerable. Europe has a problem with China because it supports Russia in the war against Ukraine. That's a security issue. India has problems with China because of another security issue, at the border. And a similar argument could in fact also be made for Japan, obviously. So I was thinking, there are ways of trying to work together. Nevertheless, in both places I got told, after people gave it some thought, the initial reaction was, yes, why not? But then on second thought, people say, well, no, because we have all these issues with the other party, i.e. India or Europe, that make it different, so we should really go it alone when it comes to China. We don't want to trust the other party to really work with us on this in a way that we want. Okay, I'll leave it at that. We're talking a little bit longer than I should, actually.
I think the next question here is, what are the key challenges in scaling India's electronics manufacturing to compete globally? I think we do need scale, and I think this India for India narrative, which Professor Srinivas brought, I think outlays that very clearly. I think India is a large market. I think India is not just a low-end market. I think India has three, I call it India 1, 2, and 3. So iPhone sales are up in India, so I think it's not that India is just a low-end market. It's clearly, doing pretty okay. So I think that India Plus, I think, is going to be a story. The second is the PLI is now getting into the value chain is also coming into India. So I think, for instance, our own company, we have invested in camera technology. The latest one is display technology, and which will go into mobile phones, computers, and whatnot. So I think the value addition is going to happen. So I think it's just that I think it's going to be China+1 is really for us India Plus. I think if we can play that card right and just execute, I think we can be there. It's going to take time, but it'll get there.
So the next question, how can India balance economic growth with geopolitical and security considerations? It's an interesting question in my perspective. My take on this is the current situation or the position that India has taken in the global affairs. I think that's very key with the current two wars, especially which is happening, which is Ukraine and if you talk of the Iran standoff. India's stand to these two countries or in these two situations is very neutral. And that gives us a huge potential in terms of what we can do in the rebuilding of these two areas. So I think one of those opportunities that actually stands out for us from an Indian perspective is to start scaling up, or rather be prepared in terms of the rebuilding of these two areas or nations. So that's something which I believe will be a very, very good opportunity for India to get up there at the earliest.
I think the next question is, how can companies build resilient and future-ready supply chains in a volatile global? I think we have to invest early. I think it's very important that, I'll give you one very good example. The Indian IT services industry, the BPOs started, I'll say, in the 90s, early 90s, moving on, they went to, and today they're called GCCs. And I think we are now an EMS company, electronics manufacturing service company. So a combination of the talent which is in a GCC plus the manufacturing capability together will giving that resilience, which is needed. So I feel that this is one of the examples, but I think we just need to think ahead and invest early. A lot of people are doing it. It's not that many companies in India are not doing, but we have to do that.
Yeah, the next question here is what sectors offer the most immediate opportunity for India in the shifting global landscape? But that's very difficult for me to answer but if you look at it, the broader perspective, especially from the industry that I'm in, we are more into the mineral processing, mining, etc. From that point of view, I think there is plenty of opportunities and scope that develops. There's a lot of mining which is required from the countries like out of Africa, where again, for example, as Professor was saying, there's a lot of money with the Chinese. They're investing it, waiting for opportunities to invest. Most of the mines in African countries are actually owned by Chinese. India does not even come into that picture as yet. But most of the Indian organizations are moving into those regions. They are getting established there and they are starting to grow from those locations. I believe that could be one of the perspectives with which India can actually, or Indian organizations can start looking at. I'm totally, restricting myself to the industry that I'm limited to, but probably, consumer goods, etc., is not something which I could foresee in the near future.
Well, I must confess I don't understand this question. Future manufacturing FDI will still be centered around Japan. As we know, Japan has started to look inward, is the question.
Japan with China.
So I'm not sure in any event, I'm just focusing on the question. Japan is continuing to look very much overseas, largely given its own demographics. It's an aging society, and so it is not the case that Japan is looking inward. It might be looking for new or a different way to approach the world, and that is possible under the new leadership in Japan now. But in terms of FDI into or outside Japan, Japan has been a long-term provider of FDI, so net FDI exporter as opposed to an FDI importer. So with the caveat that I confess I don't really understand the question, the point is I don't believe that Japan is particularly looking inward on a manufacturing side. It has an economic imperative to look outside, and it has an economic imperative to continue to engage with the rest of the world, which in a way explains actually the very strong economic relationship between Japan and India, and it has been in existence for a long time, and Japan views India both at the strategically and at as a close economic partner, and continues to invest very heavily in India too.
Thank you, sir. Great insights, and after hearing distinguished speakers, your research work, I think a lot of confidence been put into Indian mindset that if they want to be a global leader, I think totally outlook is to be changed. Ladies and gentlemen, a big round of applause to our distinguished panelists this evening, sharing some great insights. Thank you, Josh, for joining us and giving your insights. Manoj, thank you so much for being with us and also sharing your insights. Now I request Manoj to step forward. We are going to give you more books for you to read actually. Maybe Sundar, you can join us on the page. Come. It's a book published by MMA. Got some lovely articles. Sir. Come, you can give it. See.
I'll give it one.
Okay. You can all
Good. Thank you so much. Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Please. Backdrop. Please. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, online viewers, 480 viewers watched online, the number of questions which has come. Thank you for your thing, and I really appreciate it because the Q&A, we make it only a Mentimeter because we wanted as many questions as possible to be understood. I know following some inconvenience cost, that's a rule we follow very strictly. Thanks.